My name's Pete Woods. You're watching Hexhamtv. Who are you?
Hi, I'm LJ Ross, the author. I'm from the area.
Do you mind if I call you Louise?
Not at all. Please do.
So Louise, tell me a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, I was born and bred in the Northeast, near Ponteland, and lived here until I was 18 when I went down to London to study law. And I was a lawyer for about 11, 12 years down in London, where I used to prosecute fraud and do all that kind of stuff. And then I decided on a change and decided to start, or at least try my hand at writing. And that first book was Holy Island, the first in my series of now 17 DCI Ryan novels, and 3 more in another series. So yes, I've now written 20 books and counting, and haven't looked back really. So that DCI Ryan series is all based in the Northeast, which is my heartland and where I now live again with my husband and son, which is lovely.
That's amazing, because I mean, you're writing actually. Your first book was published in 2015, so it's really happened incredibly quickly for you, hasn't it?
It has. I think partly because I chose to remain independent. So I run my own imprint, and it just means that I can set my own schedule. So once the books have been through all of the editorial process and whatnot, I get to choose when we can release it, which is great, because I think sometimes if you're with a bigger publishing house, you might have finished a novel, say, a year ago, and you have a queue to join of lots of authors, waiting for their release dates. So that's one of the plus sides of steering your own ship.
So that's your publishing house is Dark Skies Publishing.
It's an imprint, yes, that's right.
Yeah. So you've just launched a new initiative, Louise. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. It's called Read, Write, Walk Northeast with LJ Ross, and basically it's an arts initiative, but it covers various things in response to the COVID-19 crisis. So I wanted to be able to offer lots of positivity wherever I'm able, and to try to generate that sort of spirit of community, which I know and associate so strongly with the Northeast. And I've seen so much of it during the first lockdown period, for example, of people pulling together to help one another. So from my perspective, I started thinking about the ways that I might be able to expand on some of the philanthropy that I already do, and try to put together a big year-long package of opportunities. So that's what we've done with my helpers, which has been brilliant. We've put together a kind of a year-long initiative. So it covers various different strands. And obviously at the moment we're limited as to localized walking, in England at least. So that's one thing to factor in, but that won't last forever. And I think certainly from the new year, it's something where people can start to venture out just a little bit more, see things that are on their doorstep. But certainly in the interim, for those who are already based in the Northeast, the walking element of the initiative might be really beneficial from a well-being perspective. And I think a lot of people are already doing that. So in terms of my readership, which I have a wonderful readership based in the Northeast, they had been asking for a while for these reading trails. And so I accelerated the process in putting them up on the website. You can do GPS navigation and follow them on your phone. And there's trails for each book, and more being added all the time. And the idea is that you can sort of follow in the footsteps of the characters whilst also stopping off at lots of nice local places, hopefully. So from a kind of local enterprise perspective, we've been talking to a lot of great local businesses, people who would like to be featured, people who would like to say, hey, we're here on the way as you pass, which is lovely, and to be able to just spotlight the area in a positive way. For those who aren't physically able to walk or who do live abroad, we're putting together videos as well, so they don't miss out and they get a taste of the region from afar. From a writing perspective, we have a lot of cash prizes coming. So there's a Lindisfarne Prize for crime fiction, which is now going into its 3rd year, and that's a £2,500 cash prize plus memberships of writing bodies and editorial packages for a writer who is resident in or whose work celebrates the Northeast of crime and thriller fiction, that is. So all of the terms and conditions are on my website, www www.ljrossauthor.com. So if anyone feels that they have a story in them, that might be worth checking out. And entries are open at the moment and will be open until the end of February next year. And we've got a great sort of team of judges on there as well. So Dave Whetstone, who used to be the culture editor over at the Journal there. We've got Jackie Collins, who's the director of the Newcastle Noir International Crime Writing Festival, myself, and we have Judith O'Reilly, who's another very well-known local crime writer and who used to be quite a high-level journalist, Newsnight, all that sort of stuff. So she's got a great eye for good crime fiction as well. So together we're all really excited to read this year's entries. I've also founded a photography prize. So the Northern Photography Prize, it's actually split into 2 awards, one for portrait and one for landscape. And the idea is to celebrate the spirit and heart of the Northeast. So that's open to interpretation from amateur photographers. So it's an amateur photography award, and each award is worth £1,000. And their work will be exhibited and judged by David Taylor, who's an award-winning British photographer and from the area, myself, and also Janet Blair, who's the editor of Living North. And Sam Missingham, who is a very senior marketing professional in publishing services. So all together we have an eye for creativity, and we're really excited to see how people interpret the spirit and heart of the Northeast at a time like this. And also, again, just to get people out and about, to get people looking again at the natural beauty of the world and at the people around them, which I think is a positive way to look at the situation at the moment, because I think that when people are more constrained in the world, it's easy to fall into negative mindsets. But I think it's great to at least have some focus. So if you're of an artistic bent, that's something for you. In the new year, we have a community fund opening up to benefit local businesses. So it's up to £50,000. It's through my imprint Dark Skies Publishing, and people will be able to apply through the portal from January. And it is for those whose businesses have been directly impacted by COVID-19, but for whom otherwise would have had a fantastic business model and things are all going fine. So it's short-term relief, and people will be able to apply for up to £10,000 a piece. They may not need that much. And the idea is it's a grant, and there's no obligation to pay back, but if you would like to, anything that they do would go back into a pot that would help other people. So that's the community spirited approach that we're taking with the fund. We have a children's prize coming in the new year as well, the Lindisfarne Children's Storyteller Competition. So that will be a gold, silver and bronze award for children through their schools, so between the age of 7 and 11. And they can win cash prizes for their school libraries, as well as prizes for themselves, and hopefully have their work published as well in local newspapers. So that would be something nice for their parents. And so in the new year, we have also various competitions, all sorts of things running throughout the year. So it's a snapshot of some of the ideas that we've got going on, but there's, plenty.
Louise, why do you think it's so important to give back to the community of the Northeast?
Oh, well, for me personally, I was brought up that way. I have my parents to thank for that approach, but whether or not I'm an author, it matters not. I think it's important to always share what you have and always think of others. But I think that particularly with the work that I do and the fact that my stories are based in the Northeast and how generous and welcoming and kind all of my readership have been from this area, I think that, it would be wrong for me not to think of ways to give back. And I'm just delighted to be able to do something.
That's really good of you. And just a word to sort of aspiring Northeast writers.
Yes.
You're sort of you've been described as a literary phenomenon and the queen of the Kindle. What would you say to aspiring writers and people who are out there thinking, is this going to work? Is it anyone going to be interested? Am I good enough?
I think what I would say to people is be brave. You know, there's always a danger of overthinking these things. It does take courage to put yourself out there in the big wide world. But particularly, say, with the Lindisfarne Prize, I hear from a lot of people before they apply and say, you know, I haven't done a master's in creative writing. You know, I don't have any experience. And I say, you don't need any experience to be a good storyteller. You don't, you know, the rest is just polish. And anything can be edited, you know, your spelling can improve, but you can either tell a good yarn or you can't. And that's something that I've seen time and again through the last 2 years of applications, that people who, of all ages as well, you know, people all the way up into their 70s have wanted to tell stories, have never quite found that courage. And when they do, you know, it's incredible, the results, and it's that sense of achievement. And I would just say to people, you don't know until you try. So just go for it.
Well, were you always destined to be a writer, Louise, or did you go into law as something that you thought was safe, or did writing come to you after you started your professional career in law?
Well, I think I've always enjoyed a bit of writing, but in terms of the law, I went into that with quite an idealistic notion of wanting to speak on behalf of people who couldn't. And so to that extent, I'm glad that I did. But it was great experience. I met some very interesting people, and some of those characters I've been able to recycle in my stories now. So it's never wasted time. But no, I think, you know, life is long, and I think that you can be many things over the course of a lifetime. And I think something to be said about writing is that it is a craft of all ages. But in my experience, I found that having lived and done other things beforehand certainly wasn't a negative, because, you know, it meant that I brought some life experience in other areas to my stories, which has been great. And particularly having needed to know a little bit about police procedure, for example. You know, we did a whole module on that when I was training to be a barrister. So although I'm not a police person myself, you know, I think it gives you a flavour of what you need to bear in mind. So it's been a useful exercise, and definitely I would say to people, if you even feel that you have one story, you should always just give it a go. There's nothing to lose.
And as well as the DCI Ryan series, you've also got another series of books, the first one that's been published to great acclaim, and you won the British Book Awards 2020 Crime and Thriller Book of the Year Award.
Well, it was shortlisted.
Shortlisted. Well, there you go. Okay. So congratulations with that. Talk a little bit about this series and how it's different from the first series.
Sure. So it's the Alexander Gregory series is more along the lines of psychological thriller, but I would say that it's a very different sort of character to my other character of Ryan. He's more of a lone wolf. You know, he's somebody who is less of a superhero, I suppose. He's somebody who is more flawed, but full of empathy. So I think any good characters, you know, you need to have a really nice, well-rounded character there. So I'm enjoying writing Gregory for that reason, because in each of the books, he's not only helping other people, but he's helping himself. You know, so with each adventure that he goes on, he's finding something in that to take home himself, which I think is sort of what we all try and do through life, isn't it? So that's been really fun to write. The first one, Imposter, was based in a beautiful part of Ireland, which was actually inspired by the village of Cong in County Mayo, which for anyone who's seen the movie The Quiet Man with John Wayne, that's where that was set. And it's very quaint indeed. And I'm a big fan of small town settings and claustrophobic writing in that way, particularly for thrillers. So that book is very much about small town secrets, lies, you know, and trying to crack the closed ranks of the people who live there, which was always fun to write. The second one was very different because it's an international series, and the second one was in Paris, which I know something about, having lived there for a few months back when I was younger. So that was quite nice in terms of a trip down memory lane for me, to be able to draw upon, you know, the memories that I had and walk my character through the streets, you know. So that was much more kind of glamorous feel to that book, because that's Paris. And then the third book was Bedlam, And that is based in a fictional mental institution up in the Catskill Mountains. So it's very sort of atmospheric, lost in the woods sort of feel, shades of Shutter Island, I suppose, that sort of feeling to it. But again, the claustrophobia of somebody finding themselves going undercover into this hospital when they're not mad, but everyone else around them may be, and they start questioning themselves. So that was again a really fun story to write, and people seem to have enjoyed it, which is great.
And are you working on anything at the moment?
Sure. So the next DCI Ryan novel, which is Cuthbert's Way, that's DCI Ryan number 17, is out at the end of this month. And then at the moment, I'm just fine-tuning the next Gregory novel, which is called Mania. So that's, again, another very different setting. It's based in Cambridge in the UK. It's, big university town, lots of scope for wrongdoing. So yeah, that's what I'm working on, as well as a big new series for 2021, which is also based in the Northeast and will be a very different flavor to the modern day series that I have at the moment.
And when you were growing up, Louise, what sort of books inspired you? Who did you like to read?
Oh gosh, well, I read widely, still do. I think I really loved Sherlock Holmes. I love Arthur Conan Doyle, and I found his writing to be, I think it's got the longevity and it's lasted so well because there's a quality to it. He doesn't waste words, and he knows how to string a plot together, start, middle, and end. There's, you feel satisfied at the end of it. So there's a real gift to that. And so I loved reading those stories, even though they're not really very long, when I was growing up. And so I enjoyed those. I loved books like The Far Pavilions by MMK because it's big settings, very richly textured. I think her knowledge of India, even though I've never been myself, it's a country I've never been to, but I always feel that when I read that book, and I must have read it 4 or 5 times over the years, you just step into India and you can smell it. It's coming off the pages so well that I remember growing up thinking, gosh, to be able to write like that, So adventure, I think, is something that I always used to read, because really that's an adventure story. It's cased in a love story, but it's actually, I think, an adventure story across India, and it's got espionage. It has wartime flavor to it as well, and very much the last days of the Raj. So it's a time and a place and a setting that I know nothing about, really, except through the pages of that book. So I read novels like it now, and they're all very good, but it's hard not to compare it with that first one I read when I was young. Yeah.
And in terms of current writers, who do you like to read yourself?
I'm quite an old-fashioned sort of girl. I actually really enjoy hard-boiled American crime fiction. So I don't know that it's so current, but I love, Jim Thompson. I like, the old Patricia Highsmiths, all of that sort of stuff. I think as a crime writer, I have a funny approach in that I rarely read pure written crime fiction from today, because I just think that sometimes in the industry, there's a pressure on writers to start writing in certain ways, or to find a voice that isn't their own, and to follow trends. Whereas actually, I really have preferred to try to stay true to my own sort of writing style. And so I think the easiest way to do that is to not be so affected by the writing of others, is to just to stick to stuff that I enjoy. So with the exception of obviously reading submissions for competitions and the odd exception, for example, I really enjoy the work of Belinda Bauer, who wrote Rubbernecker and various others. And I think that she's an excellent writer, and I enjoy her work very much.
So remind us the name of the initiative that you've just launched, Louise, and how people can find out further information about it.
Sure, it's called Read, Write, Walk Northeast, and if you just go to my website, all of the information is on there. It's www.ljrossauthor.com.
Well, Louise LJ Ross, thank you very much for talking to Hexhamtv. It's great that you're launching this initiative. It's really needed at the moment, you know, to support people. A lot of people are going through really tough times, and it's wonderful when people, you know, who have been successful like yourself, actually, you know, make a point of giving back to their community and supporting others who perhaps are going to be the successes of the future.
Okay.
So, you know, it's a great initiative, and thank you very much for talking to Hexhamtv this morning.
Oh, thank you for having me.